Welcome, everybody, to F1 or F Off, your audio pit stop for F1 news, interviews, and race reviews. I'm your host, Gabe.
Yeah, and I'm Iddris.
Yeah. What the word?
F1 season back, baby. I thought you were gonna freestyle there for a second, so I was giving you the room. I was giving you the floor to let people know. Big
My
Daddy
name
Gabe.
is Gabe, and I'm here to say I'm going to talk about F1 in a major way.
We got Louis and Charles and Carlos too. We got Max out in front. Oh no, boo hoo.
Oh no.
That's how it felt this entire weekend, right? Like
you can P11 and he'll probably stay there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Well, hello everybody.
Hi.
I obviously you can tell. I don't know how everyone else out there is feeling, but we
just wrap
getting
it up.
a little stir crazy after that kind of race. And there's definitely an aspect of that I want to talk about. I don't know if we should talk about it now or maybe later. Honestly, I think the first thing I would like to talk about before we get into the race,
what's up,
is some of the updates on some of the things that have been going on leading up to this race. The Christian Horner situation. So obviously the last that like officially we had known going into this weekend was that Red Bull had done their quote unquote internal investigation. Which, I mean, hey, you know what? Companies, they can investigate themselves. There's nothing to say you can't, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's sort of hard to paint it as a pretty impartial investigation when it's done internally and specifically about the like one of the main sort of bosses of the sport, or like bosses of the company. And so I think when that sort of decision came out, it didn't explicitly say that what was the wording was very specific, right? It said that he was cleared of any wrong. It didn't say he was. They didn't say he was cleared, right? Or there was something, the way they worded it was very specific to make it sound like we didn't find anything that was a problem. Not necessarily saying that he didn't do the stuff.
That he didn't do anything, right.
But that Red Bull have decided basically it's a nothing burger.
Right.
That's essentially what they said. Is they said, like, according to us, it's sort of like when you you're if somebody were to insult you, like say something mean about you, and they're like, hey, that hurt my feelings. And you're like, okay, well, you know what? I'm gonna have an internal investigation. And then you just put your head down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what I said was, it was fine by me, like that's basically like what it seemed like happened. So lo and behold, when everyone thought that the dust had settled, it very much did not settle. And an anonymous Google Drive was sent to like 100 people, I think, like people in the FIA, other team bosses, people in Red Bull, and it apparently contained screenshots of these supposed text messages that were the incriminating factor of Christian Horner in this whole investigation. Now, when you read through those, Iddris, what were your thoughts? What was going through your head as you were reading through those?
Through the actual like the leaked files and stuff?
Yes.
Dude, it's like, okay, so I always hesitate to do this kind of stuff or read through these kinds of things just because it's like really uncomfortable. Because it's like people's like it's like their private life is being now like fully put on public display, right?
Right.
But as far as like being able to speak towards like like have an educated point of view when talking about these things on a podcast such as ours, because we're a platform and it's important to be informed and know what we're talking about. Like looking through some of the messages, it definitely looks like it was some kind of relationship between him and whomever it was.
Hmm.
I think people were saying that it was his PA or something.
Hmm.
Um, I don't want to put information out there that isn't necessarily verified, but that's like rumor mill, reading through different forums and
Yeah.
subreddit posts, that sort of thing. But yeah, it was really uncomfortable. I was just like, ooh, like it definitely. I don't think his wife would be happy to see these messages, right? So
No.
clearly, it seemed like something happened. Now, whether or not it was full blown like sexual harassment versus I guess versus anything else that might be considered to be what's the word I'm looking for? Just not appropriate, right? That
Hmm.
is that is kind of the thing that needs to be decided now, right? Looking through that, I think at the very least you could say this is a very inappropriate relationship, given that Christian seems to be the team, like he's in the power position here, right? Versus the PA or whomever he was texting is like the subordinate, right? So there's a weird relationship there where it's kind of like, well, if I do this, I think my job is safe and my boss is happy, but if I don't
Hmm.
do this, then that doesn't bode well for my future and career here, right?
Right.
Or just career
Right.
in general, right? Because now you kind of have something associated with your name, so you're not going to put Red Bull like racing down on your CV or resume,
Right.
after something like that, right? So I don't know. I think the fact that it happened between a superior and a subordinate, um, that I think that's enough to be like, hey, this is really, really not a good thing. This is not a good look. You know better, right?
Yeah.
If you're gonna do something like this, it should be someone who's not in our team, not in our organization, that sort of thing, because that's a whole different kind of discussion, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so now it comes down to what will what is the team publicly willing to swallow, as far as the
Right.
PR damage, because there will
Hmm.
be a backlash to this. And already, I don't know if you saw earlier today, apparently Max Verstappen had been asked by MBS, that's Mohammed bin Sulayem, president of F1, so sorry, FIA, right, to
Hmm.
back Horner publicly. So that means, yeah, I don't know if you were seeing kind of the rumor mill over this weekend. Apparently, this has gotten to a point where the FIA needs to step in and do something, right? So I think it was Stefano and MBS had a meeting with Red Bull about what's going on, the things that they need to do to ensure things are going like the ship keeps sailing smoothly, right? I don't know, boy, what would I what would I give to be a fly on the wall in that meeting, right? Like, must have been super uncomfortable the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously my my first thought is like when I was going through those documents was um it's unfortunate to see like this is not an uncommon thing,
Oh no, not at all.
unfortunately. It's like this is how a lot of power dynamics work between, I mean, particularly with women in professional settings and more oftentimes than not. And it's really terrible. It's like you shouldn't have to feel like you have to demean yourself or like go along with something that makes you uncomfortable for job security. You know what I mean? Like that, it's just that's literally just abuse of power is what it is. Like it's incredibly inappropriate for any person in any sort of, position of power or, influence to be doing. It's just it's not right. And and so it's something that obviously, like it's like you said, I mean, the fact that it was somebody within the Red Bull organization, it sort of makes it slightly worse because
Mhm.
yeah, it's like, this is more that like it makes it worse for Christian as well as this employee that's making the accusation. Um because obviously the employee has to deal with the backlash of the accusation, the risk that it takes to to put forth this
Yeah.
this information, because you're at risk of losing your job, you're at risk of losing your reputation, you're at risk of losing out on other jobs in the future. It's like that's why, like, when they say, when women come forth with problems like these, the best, the way that you should really approach it is to
Hmm.
take what they're saying seriously and don't, and to not immediately believe that they're trying to lie for clout, right? Because it's
Mhm.
like the risk is too high for somebody to do this on a whim because they want to get money. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's like the risks are too high for that, because if you're found out that you're in the wrong and that you're doing
Yeah.
this deliberately, like that is a life ruiner. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so nobody would really do this without a proof of it, without some evidence. um
Right. Exactly.
Now, speaking on, I had not heard that about this meeting with Max.
Mhm.
But when you said that, it immediately reminded me of, I just finished Half Blood Prince, and I moved on to Deathly Hallows, and they have the new Minister of Magic after Fudge. It's not Slughorn. I forget his name. Something with an S, but he keeps approaching Harry to like publicly support the ministry and tell them that they're doing a good thing, even though Harry's like, no, like you're, like Dolores carved a thing on my
Mhm.
hand. Like I don't like
Shacklebolt.
how Shacklebolt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kingsley
Um,
Shacklebolt.
that's right. And so like when I hear that, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking like it's weird. Max should not have to weigh in on this situation.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because it doesn't directly involve him. It's like he's there to race the car. Christian is the team principal, but like what Christian does on the side, what he's involved in, should not affect what Max actually does on track. So
Yeah.
it's kind of unfortunate to ask. If I was Max, I would just be like, I don't have any comment on this. I'm focused on my season and my race. So I'm not like, this isn't for me to weigh in on, you know.
So
But
it's
that's
very
just me.
funny. Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's very funny that you bring that up. Because the other thing that happened today was that Verstappen's dad, so this is Jos Verstappen, publicly calls for Horner's exit from the team. Yeah,
What?
yeah, dude. Like, dude, this is really messy, man.
Oh, oh,
This is really
oh.
messy.
Does Yas want his job? Is that what's happening?
Could you imagine? Could you imagine him as team principal? I'm trying to imagine. You know how Christian comes on the radio after every race, after GP congratulates Max. He else comes in and is like, honestly, dude, you could have done better, but that's fine. At least you have the championship points now. Just remember that for next race. You know what I mean? That I feel
Yeah,
like that would be the kind of like the tip that he's on, you know?
yeah.
But yeah, like this is so messy, right? Like
It's really messy. This
I
is
like
drama.
this is ridiculous, and this is so sad over something that is honestly a very like awful thing that happens, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
because like I've dealt with like this is a personal story here. I've dealt with like racism in the workplace before, right?
Mm.
For those that just listen, then you would have never seen me, but I'm black. Um, yeah. So just so you know, very clear now. But yeah, I've definitely dealt with issues of like racism in the workplace before, right? And the thing that gets you about things that occur within the workplace, you try to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? You try to say like, look, you said that one thing, I'm just going to assume that you don't know what you're saying and what you meant, right? But what happens and what can happen is that you think about it like a week later, or 2 weeks later, or 3 weeks later, and you're like, man, I should have said something because it's kind of starts to eat away at you. And then you feel like you can come up with all the perfect responses in your head, all like the 4D chess moves and everything a month after the fact, but you didn't say it then, right?
Mm.
And I would assume that the victim in this case might feel the same, right? That she's
Mm.
like, I dealt with all this in the workplace. I tried to push him away. I should have said no, right? But did not. And now I feel really shamed about it, right? And now she's getting publicly dragged. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I'm not here to say like for sure something happened or for sure something didn't happen, but I'm giving you from my point of view what the experience of dealing with something like this. I mean, I don't think mine can really be compared to this, right? Like, um, but or not trying to compare these kinds of things, but I think a comparison can be drawn with just like the mental state that you're in after something like this happened. And it like messes with you. It can mess with you mentally.
Right.
So yeah, no, I hope this gets resolved and like, everyone feels justice has been served in some way, but
Yeah.
people who don't know what they're talking about just need to stop. And I think Jos Verstappen, he seems like a fine person, but I don't think he should be talking about this kind of stuff. Like,
No.
yikes. Yeah.
No. No. Yeah. It's like, dude, you left your kid at a bus stop,
Mm.
basically. Um,
Yeah.
Like
Oh
I
yeah, yeah,
don't
yeah. Yeah,
like
that happened, right?
your decision making and your opinions on things. I don't really, at this point, I feel like any drama that's happening around Max, I feel like the more that he just focuses it on his season and doesn't weigh in on the drama, the better he is, better off he is. But time will tell to see, because we all know that Max can be very dramatic and
Mm,
can get involved when he wants to. So,
yeah. But
um,
but Max seems way more chill and level headed though, the versus Yoss. You know what I mean? Like
oh
I
yeah,
like
compared to his dad, yeah,
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure, yeah, for sure. But I just don't want this to detract from what Max is trying to do,
Oh yeah,
in
right.
his whole race season. So,
Yeah.
it's more or less a distraction. Now it's detrimental to Red Bull as an organization, but they still got Adrian Newey, and he still put together a pretty remarkable car, which we will talk about the results of right now, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, um, yeah, let's talk about Bahrain.
Yeah, let's.
2024 season kicked off.
Mm.
Um, so, okay, one interesting thing. This is the first race since 1982 or the first season since 1982 to have a race opener on a Saturday. So that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting, and obviously the reason why they did that for this year is to make room for the beginning of Ramadan.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's sort of the reason why they started up on Saturday. Um, and so we were treated to a Thursday practice sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now practice, obviously
So
the no, I think it's probably the most viewed practice, I think, of all of them. I think if
that
anyone's going to watch practice, it's going to be this year, the first race, right?
oh yeah, absolutely. And actually I was gonna ask you real quick. So with this move to the race being on Saturday, did you enjoy it more? I felt like I did.
Yeah, a little bit. I think it gave me a chance to digest it, especially before we recorded today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it I don't know, for me, like I could kind of take it or leave it. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like I'm not like I don't think it was the most the best overall, but
Mm-hmm.
I would say I would say honestly, yeah, like I think having, from my perspective, coming home from work on a Friday night and having qualifying to watch,
Dude, it's exciting.
that's
Yeah.
cool.
That's what I
And
mean,
then
right?
yeah, Saturday, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then Saturday having the race, then that's great. And then Sunday can just be a nice relaxing Sunday. So
Yeah.
yeah, I wasn't totally mad at it. No.
Yeah.
But it also, like, it doesn't affect me that much. Like if it's on a Sunday, it's on a Sunday. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um but yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is probably the one race where the people probably watch the practice sessions the most.
Yes. Yeah.
Which man, practice was kind of all over the place. There
Absolutely.
was a wide mix of like quickest and not, and like, around the between the three sessions.
Yeah.
Um but ultimately Carlos Sainz had the fastest time, which was a 129. I think it was a 129.9, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Which was sort of an indicator of what quality was going to sort of look like. Um, and so yeah, moving into qualifying, pretty much, I think I was sort of expecting. I think I was expecting the field to be pretty tight
Mm-hmm.
because of how much of a mix it was, right? And
Yeah.
it kind of was. If I'm honest. Now it's no I guess it's, if you were to skip over the past, however long, and jump straight from 2023 into 2024 without any like skip, it wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
surprised you at all that Max was on pole.
Yeah.
But I was surprised to see that the Red Bull pulled some weight out and just, took off down the road, metaphorically, because he was 3/10 ahead of the
Yeah.
nearest rival, which of Charles
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
Ferrari. Um, that top 10, that included Haas, Hulkenberg, which was we've seen him do it a couple of times last
Yeah,
year.
he did that a lot
And
of times last year. Yeah.
I was surprised and I was happy, and it also made me laugh because didn't Haas say they were going to be at the back of the grid this year? Like at the were they just saying that?
Yeah.
Like, or I think probably what happened is that they thought I think they didn't realize how slow Sauber and Alpine were going to be. I
Mm,
think that's what I think happened. I think they expected them to make
mm,
more leaps than they did.
hmm.
So Haas is, kind of sitting pretty. It's that
Yeah.
the adage of you under promise, over deliver. That's
Hmm.
basically what Haas
That's the
is
better
doing
way to
for
do
us
it.
this year.
It also felt like the Scooby Doo meme where the Scooby Gang is pulling the mask off the villain, like
Hmm.
if like the villain's body just says 10th place or dead last, right?
Yeah.
Like you rip off the Haas mask and it's actually Alpine underneath. Like
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you dang it. I
I
would
would
have
have got
gotten it.
a
I would have gotten away with it too.
if it wasn't for you meddling children. Um, well, yeah. I mean, come on, man. Alpine, they were dead last. They were having cooling problems, so they put like a bunch of like
Oh
air
my God.
cooling vents on the side of the car.
Red Bull
They
crew
have
running over like to help
yeah,
them out after the race. Like
they have no paint on the car. It's the heaviest car
yeah,
even without all that paint, and
yeah,
it's like just the slowest. And I
dude.
think I'd read somewhere that one of their race engineers basically was fired or forced to quit or something,
Yeah.
because I mean, that was just God, that was not good.
Well,
Not good.
do you remember when they said last year that they want to be the Ferrari of France?
Hmm.
We got it. We got it, guys. This is this is a terrible. Like,
We got him. Um
oh,
yeah, it was really disappointing, but I
very.
do we did post that. I posted that meme on our page
Jeremy Clarkson.
of yeah, Jerry Clarkson uh and Richard Hammond laughing when
Yeah.
it's like Alonso and Piastri
Yeah.
looking at the Alpine, because
Mhm.
that was my first thought when I was watching. I was like, man, Alonso really made the right choice here. I
Dude.
remember everyone's just like, oh, that's so crazy. Why would he do that? It's like
Mm-hmm. He
he made a
knows.
good choice.
Yeah.
So did Oscar.
Mm-hmm.
Which, and speaking of which, both the McLarens were in the top 10.
Dude.
So
Yep.
yeah, I think I honestly think it's probably safe to say that McLaren, I think, has officially gotten back up to the top as far as
Mm-hmm.
performance level goes.
Yeah.
They're not. I think they pulled themselves out of the midfield officially,
Which is,
which
I
is great
mean,
for them.
but midfield, what would you say midfield is though? Midfield in my mind means any like teams like P4 through I'll say
Yeah,
like P7
yeah.
maybe.
I think the top of the midfield is P4, and as of
Mhm.
right now, I think it's gonna be a tight fight between McLaren and Mercedes for that this year,
Yeah.
because they are both pretty close on pace,
Yep.
pretty close on par with each other. Yeah, because the times behind Max. Okay, so Max was 3/10
Hmm.
above Charles, right?
Yep.
But from second place to ninth place,
Oh
only
yeah.
covered like a third, 3/10 of a second.
Yeah. Pretty
So
insane.
like that's really close.
Yep.
And that includes like both the McLarens, both the Ferraris, both the Mercedes, and one of the Aston Martins. So honestly, I think that like it's so weird if Max is the one that's pulling 22 seconds ahead of the field every race, then it's just going to be another season of the
Hmm.
actual race is from the second below,
Second,
and
yeah.
like
Yeah.
Max is just taking off
Yeah.
doing whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I think what this also shows too, as far as the platforms that the different teams have developed and brought to the table this year, I think McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin have shown that they have good concepts that they can then begin building on for the rest of the season, right? Now
yeah,
it's a matter of whether or not they can actually bring the performance packages and updates to make sure that they can eke out all the performance out of it. But I will say, like Mercedes is the one here that I think I didn't expect them to be where they are. I thought they would be a little ahead of the McLaren,
mhm,
but we'll see. We'll see where things lie as we go out to the rest of the season. But I will say for sure that the Mercedes, if you watch the onboards from like the free practices, quali, that thing looks so much better handling wise, right? Like
oh
the
yeah,
rear just sticks better, and it looks like the
mhm,
drivers can trust that it's actually going to go into the corner at
Right.
like the way they wanted to and to exit the corner too. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's talk about the race.
Yeah.
Idris, take it away.
Yeah, man. So yeah, it was actually really surreal. It's I always forget what it's like to come back to watching F1 after like an off season. It feels like I haven't talked, seen this friend in a long time, and we're just pen pals. And
Yeah.
his notes stopped coming to me for a while, but they're back now, and I don't know how
Right.
to feel. But yeah, so we have the races kick off, and it was a pretty, I would say, it was a pretty clean start for the most part. There was a little bit of
Yeah.
contact between a few drivers in the beginning. I think we had who was it? It was Stroll.
Yeah.
Stroll,
Hulkenberg
yeah,
punted
Stroll,
Stroll. Yeah.
yeah, Stroll and Hulkenberg. But I think actually Bottas kind of initiated that, right? Um, he was too busy checking his mullet in his mirror. Which, by the way, I love the mullet in Bottas. Like, I think I love that he's embracing this guy
Oh
now,
yeah,
right? Like this,
he's just going all
love
out.
it,
Like he's just like,
love
I'm
it.
not a Mercedes driver anymore. I'm
Yeah,
gonna stay clean cut. I'm just gonna
yeah,
go buck wild.
yeah. Which I feel like is what
I'm
his real personality underneath it all, right? It's
Yeah,
it's excellent to see.
yeah, I'm all
Um,
for it.
yeah, but yeah, it was. I mean, right off jump, dude. Like Max had built up such a ridiculous lead after the first lap. You're just like, and he's gone. So the
Yeah,
race at that point really became about the rest of the podium, right? Honestly,
right,
the rest of the points because it was really really fun. There's some fun overtaking that was happening in the positions all behind him.
right. Well, and one interesting thing that they did this year is that the DRS is now activated after the first lap, as opposed to
Yeah,
like how many, like 5 laps down the road or
it
something.
was it was 3 laps previously.
It was 3 laps previously.
Hmm.
So basically they go around one racing lap and then the DRS is activated.
It's kicked in.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think the it's still, the jury's still out as far as whether that's going to be effective. I think that I think on paper
Hmm.
the idea is that it's just going to try and prevent Max from being able to just escape down the track and like
Hmm.
give somebody else a chance to kind of keep up with him. Unfortunately, in practice, that didn't work because Max pulled out more than a second lead over Charles
Yeah.
before the end of the first lap, and so Charles couldn't even use his DRS to try and keep up with him, and so he just
Right.
chased off down the road. Now, if you remember, the issue that we had in previous seasons with the DRS train, right?
Hmm.
That was mostly due because cars could not follow closely behind each other because all the
Hmm.
dirty air behind the car was causing a lot of wash, and so it was hard. They couldn't actually get close enough to pass, right?
Yeah.
And so the DRS train was just each of them just kind of pulling each other through and just kind of, getting stuck. I think because these cars can follow closer together, I think that it could potentially mean that having the DRS activated after the first lap can work. I
Yeah.
mean, I can imagine a track where the Red Bull's not as fast and like
Sure.
maybe the Ferrari's slightly faster, and Charles is able to stay within a second of Max throughout most of the race, and then be able to and then at that point it's up to strategy, right, and pit stops. But unfortunately, yeah, Max just pulled out a
Hmm.
lead and just flew off down the road,
Yeah, he was
and
gone, man.
he
He was
was
gone.
gone. I
Yeah.
mean, like that was some Vettel 2012 stuff, right there. Like just
Dude, all the concerns about Red Bull sandbagging or this might be it. I don't know. Like everything's shaken up at Red Bull. No, I mean clearly they're good. They're good for now. And I will assume that if they continue to bring this kind of performance, like the packages, upgrades, all that kind of stuff, they're gonna be fine. So it's a matter of whether or not Checo can keep pace with Max and ensure that Red Bull is 1-2 in everything, right?
right,
Just like, sew up or button up the drivers championship really early, button up the constructors championship really early, right? So they're hoping that these teams just pick each other off from the back so that they don't, like Ferrari doesn't even get a chance at getting, first in the
right,
constructors. So
right. Um, yeah, it's wild to see. I think some people are definitely excited, and then there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be disappointed that are not going to want to have to go through this again.
hmm.
And I'm just reminded again. I'm reminded again because you had mentioned before we started that this will be my 13th
Yeah,
season watching
yeah,
F1,
yeah.
and I mean, like I've witnessed two major like domination periods,
Yeah.
Vettel domination, Mercedes domination, right?
Hmm.
And I think that the Vettel domination was boring. Okay, because
Vettel
like
Red Bull, for those that
yeah,
aren't familiar.
Vettel Red Bull, any domination is boring when it's you atop everything, just taking off the
Hmm.
entire time, right? What made the Mercedes domination different was that you had a tight fight between Rosberg and Hamilton, right?
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
were duking it out the whole time. So there was always some fight happening, right? Because it wasn't just like, oh, Lewis is like all the way down the track and Rosberg's just barely to keep up. It's like, no,
Hmm.
no, no, no. It was you didn't know who was going to
Hmm.
get pulled.
Yeah.
Like, was it going to be Rosberg? Was it going to be Hamilton? Like, was it going to be a mistake? Like, what was going to happen?
Hmm.
It was a tight battle and it got nasty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that kept the drama level high. That kept the action
Hmm.
flavorful, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's where I think that the sort of issue, the rub can sort of come in. I think if
Right.
Perez and Max were butting heads and getting like really duking it out for the top like position, like for the World Drivers' Championship, it
Hmm.
would be way more exciting. But the fact that it's like Max mostly walking away from everything, it's just that's what makes it boring when it's just like a one driver that's clearly just faster than everybody else and doesn't have any competition, right? Because
Yeah.
it's the competition we want, even if it's between team members, right?
Right. Right. You want to see that two people have like a legitimate shot at making their childhood dream come true, right?
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, it was, yeah, I think that's going to be the really interesting thing, whether or not Checo can like just get in there and keep up with Max. I think we're going to see some Checo wins for sure, but like, do we see enough where he can actually really challenge for the championship? I don't know. I think last season was his best start ever to a season, right? As
Mm-hmm.
far as like the confidence he had, and then things just kind of went off rail because he ended up not making the Q3 like 6 races in a row, and everyone was just
Right.
like, "Whoa!" Right?
Right.
But speaking of people who just couldn't get it together, let's talk about how Charles just, uh,
Is
bro,
this
that
our
Ferrari.
first? Is this our first Mamma Mia Scuderia of the season? I think it is.
Did someone forget to make sure that the entire like brake the brake lines were pressurized? Like what the heck, man?
Yeah, it was crazy. Like turn 10 was his kryptonite. He
Dude, just
kept
kept locking
he
up.
kept locking up and running out at turn 10.
Dude,
And then he started talking about how the car was violently pulling to the right every time he would
dude,
brake. Like, I mean,
that's what I'm
that's
saying. Like,
something
whoa.
that's like what somebody that's like a problem somebody has on the road with their Chevy Cavalier. Like you know what I mean? Like that's not something you expect with like a multi-million-dollar Ferrari F1 car, right?
Dude, and not just
Um
that, the fact that he said that on the radio too, I was very
mhm.
surprised. I was like, dude, you can get like black flag for that, can't you?
I
Depending on
feel
how
like
bad it
yeah.
is.
Oh yeah, I mean I would say if it's a severe enough problem to where it's visually showing itself, I
Yeah.
mean like yeah, that's an unsafe race car.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, but they seem to like towards the latter stages of the race, like all the teams that were having problems earlier on
Hmm.
seem to sort of flush them out.
Yeah.
And obviously, this being the first race, it's like these things can happen, right?
Hmm.
You find out all the gremlins really start to come out.
Right.
Mostly because I think that even in practice and preseason testing, it's still such a controlled environment
Right.
that like they will shut things down if they notice something's happening right away, right?
Hmm.
But like under a race situation, there's so many things happening that it's
Yeah.
like you can't just you know
Right.
you can't just expect everything to be perfect because it's never going to be. But yeah, man, Charles, he just could not slow that car down.
Dude,
And then on
that
top
was
of
sad.
that, Carlos, who by the way
Man.
has been sacked from Ferrari,
He has been. It's so sad.
passed Charles twice on
Yeah.
track, twice.
You know what?
Like not under team orders too,
Mhm.
just like
It's just like,
on
I'm
his
passing
own
him.
merits.
Yep.
It's like, you know what? Boom, done.
Bro,
Gone.
this is just hunting season for Carlos at this point. Honestly, I'm not listening to team orders for this entire season. Like because at this point, this is a tryout. This is a highlight tape year for Carlos. He needs to
Yeah.
get some excellent moves like done as far as like overtaking, showing
Yeah.
his race pace, all this kind of stuff, his ability to win races. I think Carlos can have a seat next year.
Mhm.
Just needs to make a strong showing this first half of the season.
It's not like it's not. I mean, what I mean, it's not like he has to appease Ferrari anymore,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Why?
I mean,
I'm not listening to
I
Team
mean,
Orders.
the worst thing they could do is fire him mid-season, but it's like, dude, you've already fired me effectively.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's just like if I'm winning races for you, or if I'm like getting on the podium for you,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm gonna pass Charles. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna do it. Like,
Yeah.
you know, yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm with you. I think that this reminds me a lot of Perez when he was in Racing Point.
Yeah.
Carlos has something to race for now. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, he
Mm-hmm.
doesn't just, it's not just like a championship. Like, he has a seat to race for.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he's
His
got a
career.
race for his career.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he's going to he's getting the let out. And I think he has really got, as they always say in drag race, that, you know, there's a fire lit under his ass, and that's
Mm-hmm.
why he's going to, you know, do the best now. So, yeah, I mean, good for Carlos, like, just, you know, putting his foot down literally and metaphorically, and
Yeah.
just, you know, getting those passes done, putting up a fight, because I mean, he was quick on track. Like, he
Yeah.
really was. Like,
Yep.
he was quick in practice, he was quick in quali. I mean, he was up there.
Yeah.
So time will tell how this season kind of shakes out between those two. I mean, I could foresee if the Ferrari are going to be duking each other out and not
Mm-hmm.
be chasing down
That's gonna be
Charles. Like,
spicy.
yeah, I can imagine like there's going to
Yeah.
be some conflict between both of them. It's going to
Yeah.
get spicy between those two Ferrari drivers, because
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, Charles is there. He's going to be trying to drink the, you know, Ferrari Kool-Aid as much as he can. But Carlos is like, nah, man, like, I quit cold turkey at this
Yeah.
point.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, while we're talking about these battles, let's talk about Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Ooh.
a couple of thoughts I have, just right out the gate with Mercedes. Their car definitely looks much quicker,
Yeah.
much more stable, a lot more confidence in it. It also looks spectacular too. That livery
I
turned
like the
out
look.
great.
I
I think
like
the
it.
silver on the nose, that's a good, it's looking good. And yeah, George Russell really put out a good effort.
Very
I
good
mean,
effort. Yeah.
I think he is also somebody that's got something to prove. Like, he's got to
Mm-hmm.
prove to Mercedes, yes, Lewis is leaving, but like, I'm ready to take up that top driver position, you know,
Yep.
no matter who you bring in.
Yep.
So, so yeah, no, he had some good solid scraps, good solid battles. Hamilton was struggling a little bit. I think he was having some overheating problems. They were telling
Mm-hmm.
him to lift and coast a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, if you don't know what lift and coast is, basically it's like essentially using the engine braking and
Mm-hmm.
the arrow from the wind to
Yeah.
basically slow down the car
Yep.
before a braking zone, and you just brake later because you just let the momentum kind of pull you down. So it's a way to try to cool the car, cool the brakes. You know, a lot of times they will do that when at the beginning of races, if they under fuel because they're anticipating a safety
Like a
car.
safety car,
If
yellow
the safety
flag.
car doesn't come out, they'll do a lot of lifting coasting to compensate for that missing fuel,
Right.
to be able to stay within the regulations. So
Mm-hmm.
but it also obviously affects cooling. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that's a part of that.
Yeah, the other thing too is that his seat broke, is from what he was saying over the radio. Like, that would suck. Imagine
Not the
like
first time that's happened for
yeah,
Lewis. He's had a few
yeah,
seats break on him.
yeah. So I can imagine. I would imagine that really does impact your ability to drive, right? Because if you can feel it shifting underneath you, you're not really stable, right? So you don't have
Right.
like a good like reference point in your car when you're actually driving it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I was surprised to see all the cooling issues that they were having. But I think this is also an effect of them just now kind of getting it right with their platform, like the car concept, right? It's gonna take some while to figure out optimal cooling and everything, right? Like, contrast this with Red Bull, where you see that they're adding extra cooling inlets all over the top of the car. I think specifically like the bunny ear slots that are behind the driver,
Mhm.
where they're located, right in the cockpit. Um, so those guys, they already had it figured out 2 years ago. Now they're just adding to it. Whereas Mercedes is starting from, they're 2 years behind. You know what I mean? So it's going
Right.
to take them some time for them to figure that out. But yeah, Russell, I was really impressed. He's doing a
Mhm.
great job. I'm hoping that they can figure out their cooling issues pretty quickly, and they can just kind of move forward, right? And
Yeah.
hopefully Lewis is able to show us what he can do in this car, because um, he's also trying to make sure he makes, he shows Ferrari too, like, yeah, this is why you're bringing me on, right?
Right.
So, hey, hopefully get him a Lewis win this year. Uh,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I was gonna say, so let's talk about maybe a Mercedes customer team here.
Okay.
So the McLarens, right?
Right.
We had Lando. I was gonna say Oscar Norris and Lando Piastri.
Oscar Norris and Lando Piastri in an alternative universe.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So how did you feel about McLaren this race weekend, or specifically during the race?
Um, honestly, they were impressive.
Yeah.
I was glad to see these things don't happen overnight.
Mm-hmm.
That's a slow burn, and
Yeah.
McLaren has been wallowing in the midfield and in obscurity for several years now. But I
I
think
mean,
that at the end of last year
yeah,
and into this year, they have officially, I think, taken that step back on the top portion
yeah,
of the podium.
yeah.
Because yeah, they're really putting up some good times. They've got two really talented drivers. I mean, Oscar
Hmm.
Piastri
Dude,
is probably one of the best rookies I've seen in a while.
who would
He's not a
you?
rookie anymore.
Yeah,
So
who would you say? I would say before Oscar. I mean, because there was a crop of rookies that came in. There was Lando,
mhm,
Albon, and Russell came in at the same time, right? And
mhm.
and Leclerc too. Would you say that? Would you say Piastri is actually better than any of those four drivers?
I think I would say that Oscar Piastri was given the opportunity. I think he hit at the right time because
Yes.
if he had
Yes.
if he had hopped into this McLaren like 4 years ago, 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't really know if anybody would be talking much about Oscar Piastri. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like not that he wouldn't have been able to fight,
Right.
to get his position where he
Mm-hmm.
wants it to be, but I think the fact that he has jumped into a McLaren at a point where they are on a strong upward trajectory. He's
Yeah.
just adding to that momentum, and it's one of those things that shows you it's like I think that's why a lot of teams for a minute there they were willing to take risks on rookies
Yeah.
because rookies can be really like young drivers can be really fast. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? They take risks. They make it's a difference between risking your body and risking your physical abilities to just go off of that sort of quick
Mm-hmm.
intuition of
Intuition.
youth,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then the more calculated drivers who are also seasoned, so it's just like
Mm-hmm.
embedded in them, do they know how to drive these cars, and
Mm-hmm.
they so the physical side is not really a problem as long as they train, but they have that calculated mind. And so you sort of get this like, well, did they overcalculate, did they under, so
Right.
I think Piastri hit it at the right time. And I think that like had Russell jumped in a Mercedes right out the gate as a
Mm-hmm.
rookie, he probably would have been doing better.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Carlos. I mean, Norris jumped in like kind of at the little inklings of the beginning of their rise again. So Norris was sort of proven his mettle in that sort of sense to where even though McLaren was still kind of not in the best place, he was still putting results in that were impressive that showed, okay, I think
Mm-hmm.
there's some potential here. So yeah, it's really tough to say how Oscar would have handled if he was not in a faster car, but I do think that
Yeah.
that's like any driver. I mean, if you're good, if you're fast enough to get into the sport, being
Yeah.
put in a
Yeah.
faster car is obviously gonna put you in better places. Just the difference is that when you're in the same car as somebody who's a faster driver than you, that's when you start to show
Right.
what happens, because
Right.
you can put a less experienced fast driver into a faster car and then put a more experienced, more talented driver into a slightly slower car, and it's going to look like they're pretty close,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like you definitely can't disregard the performance of the car. It's not all the
Mm-hmm.
driver. It's
Yeah.
definitely the car is a
Oh,
contributing
sure.
factor,
Sure.
right?
I
So
mean, clearly, right? Look at Mercedes, right? That like
mm,
Lewis finished what was like P9, P7
yeah,
yesterday, right? Like,
mm,
yeah, I mean, this guy's a seven-time world champion, but he finished
right,
P7, right? So,
right.
um,
I will say,
yeah.
and just like a final note, just on Mercedes too, because you had prompted me to think about this too.
Sure.
Mercedes is very good at developing their car over a season. So I think
That's
like
true.
even
That is
even
true.
if they start, around 5, 6, like I can't say I remember seeing Mercedes fall backwards. They might start down here, but they
Yeah,
don't
but they always,
tend not to, yeah, they tend to
yeah.
trend upwards instead of backwards. So
hmm
so there is a potential that Mercedes obviously will continue to develop the car, and I think
Sure.
honestly McLaren will too. And I think they learned last year.
Yeah.
Like, remember when McLaren just like basically circled the whole car as far as like
Yeah.
this is what we're changing? Like, I mean, it worked, right? Like,
Oh man,
it's
that was
it,
so
it
funny.
it was a joke, but it worked 100%. So
Oh
yeah.
man. Oh man, that was funny. That was funny.
uh,
Um, yeah, no,
yeah,
for sure. I think McLaren, they have nowhere to go but up from here.
yeah,
I'm really curious to see who's gonna edge the other out, Mercedes or McLaren. Um,
mhm,
so
right,
speaking of others, I think it's time for us to talk the back half of the grid here, or
mhm,
at least the rest of the midfield, and talk about the bottom
right,
folks.
yeah,
Um, Aston Martin, I was, maybe just to kick this off, I was actually a little, they felt kind of quiet, right? They felt kind of quiet at this race, and
mhm,
I was surprised to see their performance given that they had such a stellar year last year that I thought that they would kind of figured out the issues that they had towards the end of the season, right? They went back to
mhm,
like the A spec
yeah,
and just go, increase from there, right? And I think the problem is that it wasn't necessarily that they were just super quiet. It might have also been the fact that Stroll just like did not do as well. I mean, like they both finished in the points, right? So P9, P10,
right,
but it just seemed like, and also Stroll did an excellent job coming back up the rankings actually after having
right,
been spun out on the lap one incident, right?
right,
But I don't know, they were just kind of quiet.
mhm,
I thought there would be more there. We'll see more. This is just the first race of the season. I think even Alonso was having some issues, right? It seemed like he wasn't really pushing the car to its max. He
mhm,
was just out there just riding, maybe just gathering some data for this first
yeah,
initial weekend. But I really hope that as the season progresses, that they just aren't just there. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because if you take a look at the first race here and use those results and extrapolate that, they're just there, right?
right.
um, but yeah, I'm excited to see what Alonso can do. Stroll, I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm actually kind of surprised he's back, given his mental state last season. But we'll see. Maybe this is kind of like his season for him, where he's going to make a decision about whether or not he continues. But
Yeah. Well, and like, to keep in mind, like the qualifying time for Fernando Alonso, right, in Q3 was a 29.5.
mm-hmm.
29.54. Sergio Perez in the Red Bull was a 29.53. So like it's definitely not that Aston Martin, I don't believe they're taking a step backward by any means. I know people do this thing that I hear a lot where it's just like, well, Aston Martin aren't where they were last year. So I was like, well, yeah, because that was last year. Like, I think that everything compounds on top of it, right? Because you're not only
Mm-hmm.
just getting Aston Martin where they're in performance, but you're getting everybody around them is moving either down or up. You know what I mean? So like I think like because McLaren had a stronger car and because Mercedes had a stronger car, Aston Martin has been sort of looked at as being kind of shoved backwards because I
Mm-hmm.
think like as far as like best of the rest, like Aston Martin was right. I mean, they were
They
like
were
a
in the cusp.
solid third, right, at the top for a minute
Yeah.
there, a bet behind the Ferraris.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that I think that the Aston Martin has pace in it. It's just it's the first race of the season,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And
Of
like
course.
everything's gonna keep moving and trending forward. I'm just still constantly bewildered by the fact that like they're talking about contracts being up and stuff like that, and like Fernando, like what's
Mm-hmm.
he gonna do after he retires again, blah 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 blah. And it's just like they're talking about the driver that had multiple podiums for the team last year being the one who's retiring, not the guy who is like consistently multiple places behind, and
Yeah.
in a lot of instances not even in the points
Yeah.
in the same equipment. So it still continues to be frustrating to me that like a seat is effectively being, in my mind, wasted. I
Mm,
mean, I personally, I like, you say what you will about Lance Stroll, say what you will about him as a driver. I think that it stands to reason that you have had multiple seasons
I think
as a
Lance.
driver in a very well-funded team, and you have yet to produce results. Like Lando Norris came so close to winning Grand Prix. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like winning, not just getting on the podium, winning. Before, and like, so it's just like he's a kind of a driver where it's like you can see the writing on the wall. I cannot see the writing on the wall. The only way that I can imagine Lance Stroll at this point winning a Grand Prix is if
Hmm.
there's some extraneous circumstances that happen, like Red Bulls in the rain take each other out, and
Hmm.
then the Mercedes punches into a McLaren, and they're both like faltering, and then the Ferraris just bungle their pit strategy, and then here's Lance, who started seventh and just finds himself in first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's how I can imagine that going down, because I just genuinely do not feel like he is capable of competing with the rest of them in the top of with that car. I can't see it. I
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I don't know. You know,
it is what it
I
is,
don't
but
know.
I will say that Aston Martin, when it gets, I think Aston Martin will figure it out as far as performance is concerned.
Yeah.
That seems to be an organization that is ready for a championship in the next couple of years. So
Mhm.
who the drivers are going to be at the time when that does happen, I don't know. But
Yeah.
you don't have someone come in with this level of money and influence and like desire to structure the team in a way that'll work and produce championships and it not work, right? I mean, at a certain point it'll work. Maybe it's just like a one-time thing, but it's got to, right? So,
Right. Right.
um,
Well,
speaking,
if I was gonna say,
I
if
was
you
gonna
don't
say,
mind me saying, there are two or three teams that I think we can just lump in together
oh,
really quick,
absolutely, yeah,
because there's one I'd want to talk about more than the others.
absolutely, I'm with you.
Alpine, what can we say? Womp womp womp. They're ugly, they're slow, and they cannot win.
Mm. Real quick,
Sauber,
real quick, real quick about Alpine though, I gotta say. I mean, they're like all the reports are saying that people are leaving the team, right?
mm,
Alpine, get it together.
yeah,
Get it together. This is embarrassing. This is not good.
either
You
get it
need to
together.
either get it together or get out and sell your team to Andretti, right?
Yeah, right,
Like,
right. That's exactly what I was
like
gonna
it's
say.
like
Yeah.
there was an excellent Reddit post, user. If you listen to our podcast, full credit to you. If I find it, I'll post it. But um, they said, yeah. Did you guys see that Alpine finished 10th? Sure would be nice if this team were sold to Andretti, then they would make a really good showing for a new starting team, right?
Hmm.
Instead of like
Right.
a full works team, like
Right, right.
really bad.
I just can't, it's just the whole idea of the whole comment about Andretti not being competitive just really bothers
Hmm.
me still,
Yeah,
especially after you see stuff like this Alpine.
yeah.
um Sauber, I think part of the reason why they painted their cars bright green and went into a crazy name switcheroo, I think, and also probably part of the reason why Botas has a mullet is because they need to give people something to remember that they exist with.
Yeah,
Because once again, I think they run the risk of just fading literally into the background,
yeah.
like they did last year. They were literally like they weren't at the bottom, they weren't at the top, they weren't even somewhere in the middle. They were just non-existent.
They're there
They were
somewhere.
there. They participated.
Hmm.
And I think we're probably going to see the same similar things here, although they're just going to be bright green.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, Bottas had a 52-second pit stop, guys. Like,
yeah,
sheesh.
yeah, yeah. There was a problem there. um, Haas. One thing I want to say about Haas specifically. Okay, we've already talked about how they said that they were going to be, the slowest, and
Yep.
then Alpine and Sauber
Hey,
were like, hold my
under
beer.
under promise over deliver.
That's right. Um, I do think that this is a very important season for Kevin Magnussen,
Yep. I'm with you.
because Hulkenberg came in and was just I mean,
Out of
Magnussen
retirement.
was Magnussen was faster than Spin. Okay, that's not hard. And then you have Hulkenberg comes in, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh,
Hmm.
like all of a sudden, like he is certain to put in performances that are surprising people.
Hmm.
And so I think Kevin Magnussen really has to He really has to put in a stellar season if he wants to continue in the sport. Because I could imagine Haas dropping K-Mag,
Yeah,
keeping Hulkenberg, and getting either a new talent or bringing somebody else
another
in,
vet.
from other, yeah.
So I want to add to that real quick. I agree with you. Some part of me wonders if the two of them are running different setups all the time.
Mm,
That Haas is like so strapped for cash that what they're doing is they're literally just doing their development program on the track, right?
right.
Like throughout the entirety of the season, which is not the way to do it. I mean, you should be gathering data, of course, like tweak your designs and make sure that your package upgrades as they come throughout the season are actually having the impact that they need to, right? But I don't know, because I'm blown away to see sometimes this K Mag's performance. I'm like, that's interesting. That's all I think after the end of a race, but after watching Haas. But yeah, I agree with every point you made there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, now it is time. We are here to talk about RB. Or I'm sorry, VCarb. VCarb.
They're not RB, call it V carb. That is, I
Please
can't
call it
believe
VCarb.
the announcers. Just like it's fine. Like you can't. It's stupid. We've talked about it already though.
I
So
mean, because like if I can, I can't, I can no longer abbreviate Red Bull as RB.
right, right.
You know,
Like
like
everyone does.
like
Everyone says RB.
or like the Red Bulls, like the RB20 is their car. Like you can, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
if you were to put it into a, anybody hearing it, they're not going to immediately know that. It's really confusing. But if you say V carb, that sounds different enough.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, what happened there? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah,
I
I
was
think
genuinely surprised.
for as cool as their delivery looked with the nice glossy paints,
Oh, so
I don't
good.
know. It was pretty. Yeah, it was honestly the best looking car on the track, other than the Ferraris, in my opinion. Um, yeah, they just kind of disappeared, right? Like, um, it seemed like the performance, like if I don't know, they were just they were there. It was a very Sauber kind of moment, right? um, I think the thing that happened between, because I think one thing you probably wanted to talk about was the incident between Ricardo and Sonoda, right? Where
Oh yeah,
there were team orders that from the pit wall to Sonoda to let Ricardo pass, right? And Sonoda was like, why? Because there's like a handful of laps left, right?
hmm
And then the team wall's like, oh well, Ricardo looks to be faster. We'll let him have a shot, right? So they switch, and Ricardo makes like no progress at all
yeah,
on making the overtake on the guy up in front, right? And Sonoda was pissed about that, and I get that because you're a racer. You're like, look, I could have finished much higher in the positions. You know what I mean?
hmm
Um, and I don't know if you saw, but Danny Rick later was saying, quoted later as saying that, oh well, yeah, if it's like point positions, then yeah, it's a big deal. But if we're not fighting for points, then who cares, right? And I don't know. I'm not a race car driver, right? But I am someone who enjoys to play sports, right? Like competitive sports. And even if I'm not getting like a point or something for it, like I want to beat someone, you know what I mean? So if
sure.
Tsunoda had like a really good shot at overtaking Magnussen in the end, that would have been cool, but we didn't get to see that. So I don't know,
Well,
what
I
are your
think
thoughts?
it's the thing that was weird is like Yuki was really close to K Mag, right? He was
Yeah,
really close on his tail. He
he
was
just needed a
following
little
him.
bit more time. Yeah.
And then they kept giving the team orders, and he was just like, I don't understand, like why? Like, is like I don't think he was going. I don't think he was going that much slower. And what ended up happening, if I remember, Max was coming around to lap them,
Hmm.
and Yuki decided to choose that time to allow Ricardo to pass. And so what ended up happening was that like Max being involved in that traffic, K Mag basically just like gained distance, and
Hmm.
then they couldn't have they didn't so they even just squandered that opportunity
Yeah.
generally anyway. I worry that, I mean, this is the first race and we're already getting Yuki freaking out and
Hmm.
protesting like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do worry that this is going to be the Danny Ricardo show. Like I worry that
Mm.
like I mean, because obviously Danny Ricardo wants to be in a competitive car.
Sure.
And and as much as they keep talking about the V Carb Racing Bulls being like their own team now and
Hmm.
not being affiliated with Red Bull, I think like Danny is still thinking about that end game for that Red Bull Racing seat.
Hmm.
And so I think it's his goal this year to prove to dad that he can do it. You know what I mean? And so like so he's gonna, so he's gonna make the effort. He's gonna put in that kind of stink, right?
Yeah.
And I worry that Yuki is just gonna be like, what the hell? I've been here for how long? I've been putting in as much effort as I can, and like
Yeah.
you guys aren't supporting me. And then he just ends up, not getting signed, which would be unfortunate because I think, say what you will about Yuki as far as his temperament. I think he has the potential to be a talented driver. I also, speaking of Yuki though, did you see his little segment on the intro video for the for the
Yeah,
season?
yeah, he's just
It's I started laughing so hard because it's just like he's just standing there, no face, and then they just do a little side angle, and it's just the same face.
dude, some of the intros are a little weird. Like
Yeah, yeah. I just like, I laughed so hard at that. I was like, and that's why I had to make that Photoshop of him being superimposed over himself, like one of those glamour shots,
yeah,
because that's exactly what went to my head. I'm just like, this is he's just stone faced.
man, so funny. So funny.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, hopefully this isn't a favoritism situation. Hopefully it's just for the sake of the team.
Yeah, hopefully
Um,
not.
but yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see how these racing bulls do. I really do hope that they kind of get a strong midfield.
Hmm.
Just to take advantage of the opportunities when they show up. We know Danny Ricciardo's quick. And I know he's waiting for that Red Bull seat to show up again. But if
Hmm.
Paris is, if Paris puts in a strong enough of a race to prove his mettle, then Danny's just gonna stay there.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah. Well, any final thoughts about this first inaugural race, Idris? What do
Yeah,
you think this means? Are we seeing anything important that we should think about for the rest of the season from this, or is it too
I
early to
mean,
tell?
yeah, I think it's too early to tell, but I think that some of the insights you can glean, I think, are primarily coming from the top of the midfield. So you got McLaren, Mercedes, and Aston. I think these are good platforms that we'll see a lot of good development on as the season
Mhm.
progresses.
Yeah.
Um, I think VCarb is there too. Williams was okay. Unfortunately, like Sargent was just having some issues. Like again, first race. I don't know. This is him kind of getting the gremlins out of the system for both him as a driver and also out of the car. But Red Bull just looks really strong, and yeah, they're gonna keep developing too, right? So nothing.
Mhm.
The only constant is, or I guess the only constant to change, right? So
Right.
we'll see how it goes. The race itself was, I don't know, I felt like parts of it were kind of a snoozer, um, because there's always those parts of the race where you get like some chess moves happening, right? Like you're waiting for things to
Yeah.